What's up, everybody? It's Coach Dave, and I lift,
And Laura and I lift, and welcome to the She Lifts.
he lifts podcast. And tonight we are going to continue with our discussion about strength training, and we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into what strength training consists of and what and different ways we can go about it. But first, I wanted to bring up something, and it was something about a discussion that Laura and I had on the other day, um, as we were talking about some notes for the show. And one of the things that sort of came up is, we do have very different styles sometimes, but not only with our training, but with our coaching styles as well. And one thing we want to drive home is we are not here to shame anybody, make anybody feel bad, or tell you this is the way you have to do it. Laura and I have both been doing this for about she's her for 4, me for 3, and we have both had some trial and error, not only in our personal lives, but with our clients as well. So everything here is stuff that we believe in. We're not saying it's the only way. We're not saying it's the right way. It's not saying it's the best way. It's saying it's the way we do it and it's the way we believe in. And as far as shaming, we're not here to shame anybody. Everyone is entitled to look and feel the way they want to look and feel. But what we are talking about is being healthy. And I think everyone listening wants to be healthy. And even the people that aren't listening, let's face it, everybody wants to be healthy. But I am going to make a few. We do speak in generalities a lot of the time, and one of the things that we do speak, I am going to say in general. If you are tuning into this podcast, you are here for some sort of fitness advice, and whether that is to lose weight, gain weight, be stronger, be leaner, you're here for a reason. So a lot of times when we speak, we are speaking in generalities, and if that apply, and if what we're talking to you speaks to you and applies to you, we hope you listen to us. So, Laura, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I just think that everybody should find what resonates with them and their goals. So, like, maybe if we're talking about a certain topic, maybe one topic you're going to resonate a little bit more than what Dave said, or with what Dave says. And maybe the next topic you might resonate a little bit more with what I say. So, you don't have to, like, what we say, you need to adjust it to your goals and kind of find what resonates with you. Going back to our first episode with the community, if the information does not feel like it's resonating with you, feel free to like pick and choose with whatever. So you don't have to like always listen to both of us and adapt what both of us say. It's okay if one thing feels a little more up your alley than the other thing, and it's okay if you go back and forth. That's the best part about having both of us do this, is that we both do have a little bit of a different approach. So I feel like when we talked about this a little bit off air, we feel like we cover like almost everything. I mean, yeah, between the two of us, there probably are some things that we're missing. But between the two of us, we feel like we cover a pretty big chunk of like different styles of coaching and training. So feel free to pick and choose with whatever resonates with you at whatever time in your fitness journey. So going into that, with that being said, we are talking about training for your goals. So we talked last time about strength training and why you need to strength train. Now we're going to get a little bit more in depth. So before we go over all of our tips, just a disclaimer: there is no right or wrong. Yes, there is like correct form and incorrect form, but as far as the style of training, there is no right or wrong. So you kind of need to find what works best with you, what you enjoy, what you're actually gonna do. Because like we talked about at the beginning on our first episode, if you don't enjoy it, if it's not sustainable for you, you are gonna have a hard time sticking to it. So generally, you need to find what resonates with you. We've talked about this a couple times too. I personally like to lift heavy. Dave likes to go a little bit lighter weight, a little bit higher rep. But I still also do train high rep, and I'm not sure, but Dave probably throws in some heavy weights in there as well. So just
Absolutely.
because so just because that's our favorite way to train doesn't mean we don't interrupt those training blocks with different styles of training. So you don't always, like, I don't always lift heavy. Dave doesn't always do high rep. You need to throw in different styles of training to make sure that you are still progressing towards your goals. Because if we stick to the same thing over and over again, we're going to start to plateau. Not only do we need to switch up our reps, but we can also switch up a couple other things that we're going to get to. Um, and we don't want to neglect our central nervous system from those stimuluses either. So not only our muscles, but we don't want to neglect that central nervous system, because fitness is also benefiting your cognitive health as well. So yes, we want the physical benefits, but I think more sustainably and more big picture, the central nervous system and the cognitive benefits are going to be huge for your lifelong fitness journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like Laura said, there is no right or wrong way to train. But finding the goal, finding your goal, first of all, you have to be able to identify your goal. And down the road, I think we're definitely going to have to get into goal setting and what that entails. The other part of it is, I always say, I sort of touched on this last weekend when I said train how you play is a big phrase that I like to use. So if you're an offensive lineman, you're not going to train the same way that an NBA basketball player trains. Two different skill sets there. Same thing sort of in life. You know, some people have jobs where they're sedentary. They have to train their cardio, they have to train um their strength, they want to train their muscles, they want to train mobility, they need to move around a little bit more. Other people have jobs where they move and now they just want to get stronger or get leaner or lose weight or whatever it is. So again, everything's sort of relative. And one of the things when it comes to training for your goals, I think, is to identify where you want to be. And one of the easiest ways to do that, I really feel, is to pick somebody and not necessarily say, if I could snap my fingers, not that you may or may not ever get to that exact goal, but if you could snap your fingers and say, this is my ideal body type, find that ideal body type and say, all right, this is how I want to get there, and then evaluate where you're starting from to your endpoint and find out what's going to be the correct path for that. Everyone has a different path, and when we lift weights, we need to lift weights in different manners. We need constantly changing what is called the strength curve. The strength curve is when you lift a weight, for example, a bicep curl, and I'm using that. You can apply to any lift. I'm using this just because it's the easiest to visualize and it's the easiest to explain. When you start with your fist down towards the floor with a dumbbell in it, and bring it up to your shoulder, that weight gets heavier. That muscle gets tension. It reaches a point of peak tension, usually right in the middle, right when your arm's at about a 90-degree angle with your fist facing the wall. From the wall to your shoulder, down the tension sort of gets, even though the muscle has contracted the most at the top, it's still less tension on the muscle, if that makes sense. By changing the strength curve, we can cause that muscle more damage and more stimulus to grow. We can also sort of condition the muscle. And I think that's something that gets underlooked a lot in training is conditioning your muscles to respond. So again, if you are someone who is going to either move things around in a warehouse a lot or a construction worker that's constantly picking up, maybe not a lot of weight, maybe a 15 or 20 pound cinder block throughout the day, but you're going to pick up 50 of them throughout the day, yeah, you want to condition your muscles versus a power lifter who's only got to bench press 500 pounds one time. Everything's relative to your goals. And I think that is one of the things. And when we change that strength curve, we can adapt whether we're trying to make it stronger, whether we're trying to make it increase our endurance in our muscle, whether we're trying to make it grow. And it comes down to finding what is the goal and what is going to work best for you. And I know Laura, like we said, Laura is very much into lifting heavy, which generally translates into a low rep range. So, Laura, explain how you train with the low rep range and heavy weights.
Okay, so before I tell you like how I train, I just want to explain like why I train that way, because I know sometimes, and this is again a very general term. A lot of women, when they come to me, I'll be like, "Oh, we're gonna lift some heavy shit." Like I love lifting heavy shit, and they'll be like, "No, I don't want to get bulky." So I lift heavy because it makes me feel confident. Like if you're gonna give me, I do like a good hypertrophy workout. Okay, I do love the pump, which I don't get from lifting heavy. But no, honestly, nothing makes me feel more confident than coming in here and deadlifting like heavy for me, which again is relative. So whatever heavy is for me is not going to be heavy for you. So you need to find whatever's heavy for you. And it makes me just feel like super empowered. So I love to train heavy because of the way that it makes me feel. I personally don't train heavy for any type of like, I don't compete in powerlifting. I don't have, I mean, I have like goals as far as my strength I would like to get to, but I really don't have like physique goals at this point. I'm kind of just training because I like the way that it makes me feel and I like the confidence that it comes from. So that's why I like to train heavy. And when I do train heavy, I always start with like I warm up. I go through a couple priming exercises just to get the muscles that I know that I need to do ready for the movement. Work on some mobility. I start with my compound lifts first because I care about those the most. So whatever you do first is going to have like almost 100% of your energy. So I always do my compounds first because that's what I like the best. And that's what I feel the best starting off with. It sets the tone for my workout. I feel great the rest of the time because I lifted some heavy shit at the beginning. So I usually will start with a little bit higher rep. I like to warm up a little higher rep. Just to like get the blood flowing a little bit, see how the weight's moving, see how my muscles feel, and then I'll start adding on the weight. So I usually start about like 10 to 12-ish reps with whatever compound lift I'm doing. I do it the same way, whether it's deadlifts, bench press, squats. Sometimes I personally consider these a compound lift, but varying opinions. Overhead press, bent over row. Yeah, whatever compound lift I'm doing, I start off with a little higher rep. Then I'll go maybe like 8-ish reps, go a little bit heavier, not super crazy. I still want that 8th rep to be a little difficult. Then I add on more weight. I usually go down to 5 reps. Sometimes I stay at 5 reps. It kind of depends. I usually follow a program just because I need if I get in here and I do stuff on my own, my son works out here with me at home, so I start getting a little bit distracted by him, and then I'm like sitting here like, shit, what do I want to do? So I usually follow a program because I need that like consistency, or I'm gonna get distracted by my son. If I am working on my own, I start with 5 reps. I go a little heavy for 5. I see how those 5 are feeling. I might add on more weight. I might stop at 3. Sometimes I stop at 3, depending on how it's feeling. If it's like a pretty significant like amount of plates on the bar, I like to try to increase my reps after that because again, it makes me feel good. If I'm like past the point, so there's like, if you work out a little bit, you probably know this, like adding a plate onto your lift is like a milestone. So if I have like 2 plates on, I'm gonna try, or whatever, however many amount of plates, depending on the lift. I may, like my bench press, I can bench a plate for like 1. So that's about it. So I usually try to get to that plate and then I'll do my 1 set for my bench press. Deadlifts, I can do 2 plates fairly easily. So once I get to that, I kind of like to increase my reps a little bit because it's like, oh wow, I have like psychologically in my head, I'm like, oh cool, I have 2 plates on, so let me like get after the reps. And then sometimes with deadlifts, depending on how my back's feeling, I'll go for a PR. Squats, I'm not a big fan of squats, I'm gonna be honest. I know I need to do them, and I do them, but they are not my favorite thing. So squats, I usually like to go a little higher rep because that's just personally how I enjoy it. So yeah, that was a long explanation of how and why I like to lift heavy.
So, and Laura's right. I do lift heavy, and I'm not gonna say, oh, I absolutely no lift heavy. There's no reason. There's absolutely a reason. When you lift in that low rep range, you're definitely training for strength. Like Laura said, she's trying to add plates for the bar. It's a milestone for her, and it's a confidence builder for her. I'm sort of gonna go on the other end of this point. Is I am training most of the time for a purpose. I have talked about it on the show. I am into wrestling, jujitsu, MMA. Um, I like, like Laura said, picking heavy things up makes her feel confident. Tossing grown men around, that makes me feel confident. Um, so that's what I'm training for. One of the things that yes, I want to be stronger because I want to be stronger than the guy across from me. Because if his jujitsu is better than mine, or his wrestling is better than mine, or his striking is better than mine, I better have something that's better than him. So if that's going to be my strength, that's it. That's what it's going to be. So I do train for that. And when you train in that low rep range, that sort of 1 to 5, even up to 8, you are really impressing your strength. I train 10 to 12, probably in the 10 to 12 rep range, sometimes into the 15s, a lot because again, I want to be strong, but also with strength do is some size gains as well. I have a weight that I have to maintain. My weight that I try to maintain is around 180 to 175 pounds. When I cut down for competition, I try to cut down to 160 pounds. So I don't want to be able to lift 500, deadlift 500 pounds because realistically, in a competition, how much am I going to pick up? If the guy that I'm wrestling weighed in at 160 pounds, chances are by the time we actually get out on the mat, he's back up to 170, 175 pounds. That's the most I really realistically need to pick up. So the longer I can be able to pick that weight up, the better it is for me in my endurance in that match. And I find the higher rep range, even if you have to slow down the reps, you can it is good for that muscular endurance. It also, in general, as we get older, our body gets to this point where it stops wanting to gain strength. You also have to realize that eventually your body is going to say, all right, no more. Okay. Yes, I know guys who are about my size that can deadlift 400 pounds. I'm still working. I am this close to being able to deadlift twice my body weight for one time. I did it one time. I hit a PR of 355. 180 times two is 360. And right before I did, I said I should put some 2.5 pound plates on this just so I can say I hit 160. And I'm like, nah, let's just go for it. And I'm still kicking myself in the ass for not doing it, by the way. Um, but again, that high rep range, it is a very important part of your training. And like Laura said, once you get to a certain point, once you get to 5 reps and it's too easy, let's try to push that 5 to 6, or that 6 to 8, or that 8 to 10. If we so the more, and then we start adding weight to our 5 rep max, and work from there. One of the things that I like to train sometimes when I'm not actively getting ready for competition and just sort of working out to maintain and gain strength is what's called a pyramid set, where I'll start with a 10 or 12 rep max. Then I'll go down to an 8, then I'll go down to a 5, then I'll go back to that 8 or 10, and then I'll go back to that 10 to 12 and try to keep making sure I hit those marks each time. That is something else that I think is going to give you sort of that best of both worlds. And sort of get you not only into your fitness goals, but also get you to your physique goals as well. And I think Laura, I'm going to pass my soapbox over to Laura because I know she has something that she wants to say about that right now.
Yeah. And then real quick before I go into my next thing, I also wanted to touch how Dave said that like he doesn't need to lift heavy. He doesn't need to deadlift 500 pounds because he only needs to be able to pick up however much the person weighs. Also, too, like if you add so much muscle, like if you do anything like Dave does that requires like a weight class or mobility, having strength in those different ranges of motion that like we're really not in a lot unless you are like fighting, or I don't know. I can't honestly off the top of my head think of another example, but I'm sure there are more out there. When you add size and you have to, and you're training for a specific thing, like a sport, like if you play a sport and you're like, oh, I want to get super muscular, your that added muscle mass is also going to impact your form and your body mechanics. So not only do you not really need it to complete your sport, but having that extra muscle mass is also going to get in the way. So yeah, it's like you might be thinking, yeah, that sounds cool. I want to lift heavy, but you also have to think about your daily life. Like, does that size that comes with it, and you not always are going to build size. Like that also depends on your nutrition. If you're not eating to complement that heavy lifting, you're not going to put on size anyway. But if that added size is going to impact your like hobby or your profession or whatever, then that's not going to be suitable for you anyway. Um, so when we are getting into our lifting, now that we kind of assess what our goals are, and we talked about a little bit, you don't want to be in that same routine all the time. You also don't want to be lifting the same, even when you're in, like, even when I'm in a heavy strength phase, I'm not going to be lifting the same weight every time. Not only am I not going to be lifting the same weight every time, well, Dave touched a little bit on this last time. You want to try to make it harder than last time. So you want to put a little bit more weight on the bar as you get stronger. You can also make it harder without adding weight to the bar. There are plenty of ways, and I love progressive overload. So you can add weight, to make it harder. You can change your tempo. So your tempo is the speed that you perform your reps. Most people kind of do like a 1-1. So we're gonna keep with the curl exercise or curl example. So it'll be like a 1 on the way up, a 1 on the way down. You can even make a curl harder. So I can take 5 pounds. I can curl more than 5 pounds. It doesn't matter how much I lift, but I'm telling you, I can curl more than 5 pounds. I can take 5 pounds and I can decrease my tempo and make it so slow that this 5 pounds is going to be ridiculously heavy. Curl's not the best example, but you can also speed up your tempo. So you can work a little bit more explosive movements and try to get those fast twitch muscle fibers. If you're in a plateau, the tempo and the next couple examples are going to be really great ways to break out of your weight if you're having a hard time increasing your weight on the bar. So you can slow down or speed up your reps. You can go anywhere. Honestly, most people tend to do their reps a little bit too fast. You want to shoot for like a 4 on the way down or up, depending on the movement. So like a curl, I would be going like 4 on the way up, pause for a second. And then a curl, honestly, slower the better on the way back down. Same thing with a squat. Slower the better on the way down of your squat. Control that descent. You can even play with the tempo in the second half. I could do a slow bottom half. I could do a powerful top half on my squat. So adjust your tempo a little bit. Watch those strength gains come through without even adding any more weight. Honestly, when you adjust your tempo, you're going to have to probably go down in weight, which is cool. So if you're ever having a day where you can't lift the weight you normally can, if you're like intermediate advanced, it kind of messes with you psychologically a little bit. When you're having that day, instead of being like, oh, my workout is trash, like this lift is trash, I'm over it, like this is stupid, slow down your tempo, keep that weight. Maybe it's a little lighter than you normally do, but we're going to change the stimulus, change the way that you're thinking about your workout so that it turns into a positive thing instead of a negative. You can also increase your range of motion. If you're having a hard time getting the bar off the floor for your deadlifts, or you want to get your squat deeper, try to work on the range of motion that you either can control and nail down that form that you can control before you increase your range of motion. Or if you're having a hard time getting your deadlift off the floor, do some deficit deadlifts. So like stand on a plate and lighten the weight and lift that your feet are a little bit more elevated. So you have more space at the bottom of your deadlift. If you're having a hard time at the top of your deadlift, put your barbell, so like imaginary barbell, plates are here, put the plates on an elevated surface. So now you're shortening the range of motion and you can focus on the top half of your deadlift. You can also increase and decrease the amount of reps that you do. You can do isometrics, which are where you're not using any weight. You're pushing against some kind of resistance, whether that's your own body weight or some kind of outside force. So like my favorite isometric, and a really good example is like isometric chest press. You're going to push your hands into each other as hard as you can and then try to press out. I'm not even using any weight. That's super hard. You can do isometrics. You can change the equipment that you're using. If you always do XYZ exercise with a dumbbell, switch it up for a band or a kettlebell. Kettlebells are fun because of the way that they're loaded. They're a little bit off balance. You can do that. You can also increase the frequency at which you're performing the exercise. So if you have a certain, I'm going to use pull-ups for an example because if you follow me on Instagram, you know I do pull-ups almost every day. I used to not be able to do pull-ups every day. Pull-ups are a practice thing, so it doesn't matter how strong you are. Most of the time, if you don't practice pull-ups, you can be super, super strong. A good generality, if you don't practice pull-ups, you're probably not going to be able to get up on the pull-up bar and do a pull-up. So practicing them multiple times a day, and you're not going for like PRs or anything. You're just thinking about practicing the movement. So increasing the frequency that you do those pull-ups will make it a lot easier. And you may have to start with, if you were going with pull-ups, you may have to start with band assisted pull-ups. And every time you see a squat rack or you have those pull-up bars at home, do like 1 or 2 pull-ups. It doesn't have to be the most amount that you can do, but just increasing the amount of time that you do that exercise will take you through your plateaus without even having to add any weight onto the bar.
Another one of my favorite ways to add resistance without adding weight is to use a band, and not even necessarily change just a band by itself. I'm gonna stick with the curl example because it's easy to do. If I take a resistance loop, a large resistance loop, grab the loop around the dumbbell head, and then stand on the bottom of it, that dumbbell that now weighs 10 pounds, the heavier I get it and the more I stretch it, it's more than 10 pounds of resistance through the entire exercise. You can do the same thing with the deadlift. You can do the same thing with a squat or a bench press, where you tie the bands around the bar and then anchor them to the floor with a plate or a dumbbell or a kettlebell, and then try to press that weight. You may even have to lighten the weight from something that you could normally do whatever rep range, let's say a 10 rep range, that you can do 10 rep range. I can do, let's say, 185 for 10 reps. I lighten that down. I probably have to go down to 155 with two roughly 30-pound resistance bands. I'm sorry, 10-pound resistance bands um, hooked to my kettlebells on the floor, and then bench press that up. It's going to give me a different sort of resistance because the higher I get that weight off my chest, the more resistance there is for it. And then once it's up there, now I have to control it on the way down so it doesn't crush me. There's always a way, and again, these are ways that I think a lot of times we say progressive overload, harder than last time, and people think of adding weight to the bar. There comes, like I said, there comes a point when your body, when your framework is just not built to can't. Now, most of us are probably, I'm going to say 90% of us, myself included, Laura, probably you too, we're probably so far away from that. But there comes a point where that framework just can't handle any more weight putting on the bar, and adding weight at a one up, one down, at a push it up, push it down, push it up, push it down tempo is not going to get the job done anymore. We have to find, once we get to that intermediate level of fitness, we start to have to start playing around with those things. And again, this is where I think finding your goal is important. And even if your goal is just strictly a physique goal, just I want to look better and feel better about myself. Even if that is your goal, you need to find what's going to work for you to get the physique, that toned or lean or whatever physique that you want. One other thing when it comes to low reps versus high reps, there's sort of this myth out there, and that is that lifting low reps is going to make you strong. Lifting high reps is going to make you lean or toned. That's not really the case. Having a lean body has more to do with your nutrition and some sort of movement than it does with the style of lifting you are. Part of the reason, and I get the reason, you watch powerlifters, most of them aren't lean. Most of them if you weren't watching them lift, power clean 7,000 pounds, you'd say, hey, look at this big guy right here. Same thing when you watch a lot of athletes, lean athletes like sprinters or wide receivers. You watch them work out. They're doing high rep workouts because they are working on that muscular endurance. So yeah, those two students sort of lend them things, but let me tell you what, I've seen bodybuilders lift, like Laura said, where they're doing 20 reps, and maybe they'll start with one weight and then drop down to another weight for 10 reps, and then drop down to another weight for 10 reps, and then drop down to another weight for 10 reps. Next thing you know, they've done 20, 30 reps. That's a lot of reps. And they're using that stimulus to get that muscle to grow because they're putting so much stress on it. So low reps versus high reps don't necessarily get you one way or the other. Low reps don't make you bulky, or I'm sorry, high reps don't make you bulky. High reps don't make you toned.
You were good. Yeah. So one thing with that example that Dave threw in, so when you see power lifters and like professional athletes and those different body types, like CrossFitters the CrossFitters are a common example that my clients will use, like saying like I don't want to look like that. Because they have a tendency to be a little boxy, they don't tend to be curvy. Professional athletes get to become professional athletes usually because of genetics, not always. So again, general term. With that being said, their body type, their genetic body type tends to be better for those specific activities. So that's why you usually see bigger powerlifters, and that's why you usually see smaller runners, because their body type usually tends to lend towards those exercises, and that's why they're good at them. So don't be discouraged. Like I like to lift heavy, but I don't know, I feel like I look like a regular person. So lifting heavy and trying to build muscle and lifting regardless of your rep range, building muscle will look good on your frame. So don't think that you only have to lift a certain amount of weight or a certain amount of reps or I have to only lift low weight, or I only have to lift heavy weight because this is going to get me to my body type. Nutrition plays a huge factor in this. So I'm gonna call myself out right now. I like to lift heavy in the summer. I'm a little backwards from everybody else. I don't really have body goals. I talked about that a couple times. I am not on my nutrition in the summer. I don't really care about getting lean for the summer because my son and I, we go to the pool because that's just what we do in the summer. And I'm not gonna eat like cold. I'm not gonna eat a cold meal that's like high protein and it fits my macros and whatever because there's no microwave there. So I don't eat the healthiest in the summer because I'm not complementing my heavy lifting with the appropriate like amount of nutrition. I'm not going to build any muscle. Same thing goes vice versa. If you're only doing high rep, if you're doing high rep and you're hitting your nutrition goals and you're in a little bit of a surplus, you will still build muscle. So nutrition comes down to deciding if you're going to build muscle or not. That being said, you don't need to train differently to build a certain amount of muscle. So you don't need to train low rep to build a lot of muscle. You don't need to train high rep to get toned. So a lot of women, when they come to the gym, they pick up the fives because most of the time they're pink or they're green. They're like neon green. They're like a fun color to attract women because that's what we are kind of marketed to. We're kind of told like, oh, don't get too big because that's going to be manly, or like don't lift heavy because people don't like that. You need to find what you like. And honestly, I find that a lot of women go to the gym and they pick up the 5 pounds. Your bag is probably more than 5 pounds. So you're carrying around your purse or whatever all day long, and it's probably more than 5 pounds. So going into the gym and picking up the 5 pounds is not really going to help you because you're doing that all day long. You're not going to get big overnight. You're not going to wake up one day and be like, okay, I look boxy and my muscles are huge. My one client just texted me this today. I've had her for a little over a year, and she texted me, can we hold back on shoulders for a while? I feel like my shoulders are getting too big too fast. She acknowledged like, hey, this is a body part that I don't really want to work on for a little bit. I'm still going to train it so that I can keep my strength, but I'm going to adjust the way that I train it because I don't want to focus on building any muscle in my shoulders. So just if you have the idea that you want to get toned, honestly, lifting heavy is going to get you closer to that toned look. Because honestly, toned is a made-up word. We use it now because it has been marketed to us, but being toned is just your muscle mass. You either have big muscles or you have small muscles. And I know that's like, and I'm not trying to like hate on anybody. If you use that, that's okay. I'm just trying to explain to you I'm just trying to explain to you that you don't need to train a certain way to get toned. I have not saying that anybody should want to look like me or that I should be your body goals or I have this amazing physique or whatever. A lot of times my clients will come to me and they'll be like, I want to have like your shoulders or whatever. I lift really heavy on my shoulders. Shoulders is honestly my favorite body part. So then when I tell them like, okay, if you want to have shoulders like me, like we're doing some heavy barbell press, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, but I don't want to get like big. And I'm like, well, you just told me that you wanted to have shoulders like me, and now I'm telling you that how I got my shoulders was by lifting really heavy. So moral of the story, don't be afraid to lift heavy because muscle will look good on your body, and I promise you're not going to get bulky overnight. Lifting heavy is not going to make you huge. I've been trying to get huge for a long time, and I still look like a regular person. Again, I'm not really on my nutrition like I should be, so that's a little bit of it too. But it is not going to happen overnight. So please switch up. Don't always stay in your high rep out of fear of building too much muscle because you only need to switch up your phases for like 3-4 weeks. So you're not going to build a whole bunch of muscle in 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually in that high rep phase right now as we're recording this, I'm actively getting ready for a wrestling match. So I'm actively working on getting, and I train in this phase a lot, and I don't I'm getting leaner because my nutrition is different than it normally is. It is more on point, and actually, we'll get into this in another episode down the road. But I'm actually on a very carb restricted diet for the last 3 weeks. So yeah, your nutrition has more to do with your body type. Strength training has to with it, but whether you get bulky or bigger or leaner or whatever has more to do with your nutrition than sometimes with your working out. The other part of that this equation too is again we talk about training for your goals and a lot of times we throw sports out there as just because it's an easy visualization. But there's a thing when it comes to strength training called functional strength training. Deadlift is actually a perfect example of a functional movement because think of how many times throughout the day you deadlift. Laura giving me her little flex right there. Squat is actually another one. A bench press, kind of, sort of, maybe. But have you ever seen guys on a stability ball or on a Bosu ball standing there doing with a kettlebell or a dumbbell overhead doing lifting up one leg or doing a single leg RDL. Those are examples of functional strength training. You're training for balance. Step ups. Step ups are another example of functional strength training. We go up and down the stairs every day. And even if we have a 1-4 rancher, there's steps somewhere in our life, whether it's at work, whether it's at uh, in the store, somewhere in our life there are steps. We have to get up and out of our car. We have to do things. So it's not just sports that we train for when we say functional strength training. Yes, that is part of it. There are things that I train when I train, and not always lifting weights, but there are movements that I train that are functional towards wrestling and jiu-jitsu and MMA. But there are also movements that more often than not that I'm training that will benefit me as I continue to get older, hopefully. Um, I want to be I've so throwing something out there that's a little personal about me. I have a father who is 30 years older than me. He hurt his back about uh 7, 8 years ago. He has trouble getting up and down the steps. He has trouble making it around the house. He has trouble sometimes getting on and off of the toilet. Like he is very, very limited in his mobility. And that more than anything is my goal is to not be like that. Yeah, the jujitsu is fun. Yeah, that's sort of my outlet for a lot of my frustrations in my life. But my bigger goal is to be 75, 80 years old and still be able to pick up my grandchildren and still be able to walk up and down the steps and not have to be on a ground floor condo or go take the elevator everywhere I go or be in a wheelchair. Those are the things that I think when we talk about functional strength training, I think those are the things that more of us need to focus on and not get this idea of sports out of our head because yes, sports are great. I love sports. I'm not gonna lie. I sit and watch football every Sunday. I talk about basketball and baseball and UFC and wrestling. Um, but at the same time, those things will eventually leave me by. I want again. I want to be 80 years old and still be able to. I'm going to throw this out there. I have a woman in one of my group fitness classes that I teach who is 76 years old. She puts women and men half her age, sometimes a quarter of her age, to shame.
Yes.
She can do push-ups. She can do squats, low weight, high rep squats. I've never put her under a barbell. Low weight, high rep squats. She can do, if you guys don't know what this exercise is, she can do a surrender. A surrender is where you kneel on your knees and then stand up. She can do that with weights in her hand. I want to be like her.
Oh yeah. Damn, that's impressive
Mhm.
as hell.
It is.
So
It really is.
I want to be like her too. I don't even know her, but she's my new goals. Like Dave said, you want to train for your life. So functional training looks a little different. If you like Dave talked about with his dad, if you have a hard time getting up and down out of a chair, your main focus is going to be getting up and down out of a chair. With functional training, we have three components that we focus on: mobility, flexibility, and strength. Mobility is your flexibility mobility is your strength in that flexible range of motion. So mobility is flexibility and strength. We want to. Most people are lacking, just with this day and age. Most people are lacking in mobility pretty much everywhere, because we have a tendency to be a little more sedentary. So some things to focus on: ankle mobility, hip mobility, lower back mobility, and shoulder mobility are the ones that I most commonly see people have injury or like limitations with. So everything is connected. So ankle mobility and hip mobility are connected to knee pain. So if you're experiencing knee pain, you want to try to focus on your ankle mobility, which means you want to increase your strength in that ankle range of motion. Shoulder mobility, we do a ton of stuff in a forward motion. We literally, I can't think of anything that you would do something behind your back. So most people tend to have a little bit of forward shoulder, especially with phones and computers. We tend to get a little bit more hunched over as we're sitting or working or whatever. Our posture starts to hunch over. So we need to do correctional mobility and corrective exercises to bring that posture back, to make sure our spine and our skeleton and our skeletal system is all where it needs to be, so that we are not starting to lose our ranges of motion, starting to lose strength, starting to lose that posture, because losing your posture, that posture slipping is going to add up over time and eventually get you to an injury. So we need to make sure with the spine, we also need to make sure that we are loading the spine. Like last time, Dave talked about how strength training affects your bone density. Yes, we want to have dense bones because, like he talked about last time, it's going to help you in case you fall. So as we get older, we do want to load the spine while we can. Like Dave said with his client, he's not going to put her under a barbell because that's honestly just not safe. But there are other ways you can load your spine without putting a barbell on your back. I have a client, she was in a car accident, I think. I actually took her from somebody else. She used to be somebody else's client, so now she's mine. So I'm not 100% on the backstory. But she is paralyzed on her whole left side. So when I load her spine, it's going to look a little bit different. So this morning I had her doing like a dumbbell loaded seated good morning. So all she's doing is like hinging back and forth, but she has a dumbbell on her shoulders, which means she's loading her spine safely, so that we can start like putting a little bit of compression on that spine, so that her muscles have, or her bones have to start building that bone density, getting stronger, getting more dense, to reduce or to kind of like I don't know, adapt to that loaded spine. So just because I'm telling you to load your spine doesn't mean you always have to load a barbell on your back. As I'm sure most people experience back pain. Just because you have back pain doesn't mean that you should avoid loading your spine. Honestly, most times it could benefit you safely. That's a very general term. Please consult a physical therapist before you do that. Because sometimes the reason that your back hurts is because it's weak or immobile. So when we start to load the spine again, it can help alleviate any back pain, short term and long term.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things, especially when it comes to back pain, a lot of the times that people neglect is a lot of times low back pain can translate to either
Yeah.
underactive or weak glutes, and we spend so much time putting heating pads and not working and trying not to load your spine or lift weights or whatever, when really in reality the answer is, you know, do some leg curls, do some and I'm going to say this, and again I'm going to speak in generalities, not to single anyone out, but men, especially men, when it comes to leg training, we are all about our squats and our leg extensions and our leg press. We think that leg training begins and ends with your quads. Guess what? There's a whole other side of your legs, guys, and not and those of you are that are just into aesthetics, women like butts too.
Second
So
that.
just so you know. So don't be, the moral of the story is don't be afraid to load your spine. Don't be afraid to lift heavy. Don't be afraid to lift in a high rep range. Don't be afraid to try to load your exercises in different ways. There's a and we could probably do a 3 hour show on this, let's face it, on different ways to load your exercises. But at the end of the day, load your exercises for your goal. Consult a trainer or consult somebody on how to load for your specific goal, whether it's an athletic endeavor or whether it's a physique goal or whether it's just to improve your quality of life. Let's find a way to get to where we want to be and find a way to do it correctly, do it safely, and do it in a way that we're going to be able to be consistent. Because at the end of the day, everything that we talk about, whether it's nutrition, whether it's our strength training, whether it's working out in general, everything comes back to consistency and discipline. So that is all we have, I think, for this week. So join us again next week for the She Lifts, He Lifts podcast. Well, we're going to do something a little different. Laura and I are each going to give you 5 different options of things that we think are important whenever you are getting stuck somewhere in your fitness journey, whether you're beginning, intermediate, or more advanced. 5 things that we think you need to reevaluate at every point in your fitness journey. Look me up on Facebook at Rockstar Fitness, on Instagram at DWebster023.
I'm follow me on Instagram at
All
Laura
right.
Ash _ CPT on Instagram and TikTok, and then Laura Ash Personal Trainer on Facebook. Don't forget you can do hard things.
And until next week,